morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. You know, this show is fun every single day. I love the thing that I get to do for a living, but it is especially fun on certain days like this. Morning after a game day on Saturday. It happens to be a holiday, so we probably have a few folks who are typically working, especially if you're like a teacher or something like that. You may be settled in with that second cup of coffee as we're coming on live here in a way that you typically wouldn't be. To all of you, we're so glad to have you here. Thanks to Jay and Kaylee, who've gotten up this morning to come in here and help us do this show and what would otherwise be a day off for a lot of folks. But you got to be here today. You got to talk about what we just saw. Georgia starting the 2024 season off in style. The lousy, stinking Gators get embarrassed. We're all over that on the program here today. But I believe there are a couple of really important takeaways from what Georgia did against Clemson on Saturday, both in terms of, you know, kind of why it was that we sort of saw this coming and also what Georgia could take with it the rest of the season. Now, total confession, we're not going to get to it all today. I don't think we can. I'm always a little nervous. You know, I don't typically get nervous doing the show. But when you know there's a lot to cover, you're always a little nervous. Do you get it all in? Well, I can tell you this, that we're not even going to try to get it all in today. You just simply can't. But over the course of the next few days, you better believe we're going to hit every moment that mattered from this Georgia win against Clemson, laying the foundation for what could be a really, really fun 2024 season. So settle in. We'll make good use of your time here over the course of the next few minutes as we talk some Georgia football, because on a day like this, how could you not? It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I begin today's show with an urgent question for all of you. How about them dogs? How much fun was that on Saturday? Georgia 34-3 against the Clemson Tigers. Now, let me also extend a word of warning just for a moment. If you are not a fan of the Georgia Bulldogs, or perhaps not a fan of me, I'm obviously not everybody's cup of tea. I totally understand that. If you're a fan of, let's say, a different team, and you've somehow stumbled into this broadcast today, the big tech algorithm has fed this to you, and you've found our show, just please know this. If you're not a fan of me or not a fan of the Georgia Bulldogs, you're about to have a miserable experience, because we're really sort of feeling it today. We're feeling very good here on this Monday morning. Happy Labor Day to all of you. Absolutely soaking it all in. Georgia's 34-3 win against Clemson on Saturday. Jon Stinchcomb here in a moment, but for me, for a couple of minutes here off the top, first of all, thank you to all of you, several of you reaching out to me on social media to let me know that you had recognized and acknowledged the fact that for the most part, we called this one. We said on the show last week, and listen, I know I'm a loudmouth, and I know I shoot my head, shoot myself, shoot off the mouth every now and then. I do get that. But we said last week on the show that we thought that Georgia was in all likelihood going to win this game somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 points, and that's exactly what happened. So for those of you who kind of called us out on that, we certainly appreciate that. Here's all I ask from you, for the rest of you. Eventually, when I could, at some point in time this season, you know what's going to happen. I'm going to shoot off my mouth about something, and it's going to turn out not to be true. Can we at least remember the one I got right? Because goodness knows there's one coming at some point in time in the future that I'll get wrong. So hopefully we'll at least have some memory of this to call back on when that happened. But let's ask a non-rhetorical question here. How is it that we felt like we could see this one coming, that Clemson was not going to be able to be competitive with Georgia? It's not a rhetorical question. As I said before, the answer to this matters. And it's not calculus, because I'm not smart enough to do calculus. And it's probably not even algebra either, because, let's face it, my math grades weren't very good in that either. What we're talking about here, the difference between Georgia and Clemson on Saturday kind of comes down to just sort of basic arithmetic, basic counting. And the one thing that we saw is that when you looked at these two rosters, the Georgia roster that they were bringing to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the Clemson roster that it was bringing to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, when you looked at these two rosters, it just certainly seemed like there were a lot more players for Georgia capable of playing, capable of making a contribution. It's just overall a much deeper roster than the one that Clemson has. And I think there's a sense to which that some people understand a portion of this, but I don't think they understand all of this necessarily. In other words, the fixation here is, and by the way, you're seeing some beautiful video on the screen from some of the celebrations and the moments that mattered on Saturday. Great job by our entire team here, including Cody Chafin's, getting up that on the screen. It's fun to watch that on this Monday after a game. But the point here is that I think the people fixate on a certain aspect of Dabo Swinney, the Clemson coach, a certain aspect of the Clemson program of all of, oh, they don't have transfers. They don't have transfers. But that's not the only thing that's going on here. Clemson doesn't have transfers, and they're not recruiting as well as they once did. And Georgia, not only is it still recruiting at as high a level as it ever has. Think about the sheer amount of players who played and kind of played what Kirby Smart would call winning football for Georgia on Saturday. How deep did they go at the linebacker position? How deep did they rotate along the offensive line? We just run through all the names, and eventually we probably will. They're recruiting at a level that that's as good as they've ever recruited at, and they're still willing to add a handful of transfer players also to make sure the roster is as fully filled out as it possibly can. And Clemson's just not doing that. It's not just transfers, it's everything else. Georgia works harder on its 90th player than Clemson works on its 70th player. That's just sort of the difference. And it just shows up. I'll tell you this, and I said this, I believe, on our postgame show on Saturday. You're watching the 60-minute game unfold, and you're thinking about Georgia. I'm evaluating everything that they're doing. I'll be honest with you. In 60 minutes of football, I'm not sure that I truly ever thought about Clemson one time. They were the opponent, but they were kind of a non-factor in the game. Or as, are y'all gamers? You got anybody in your life that's a gamer? The phrase that gamers use sometimes, they call them NPCs, non-playing characters. That's sort of what Clemson was for me on Saturday, sort of a non-playing character, sort of a non-entity. They just weren't a relevant factor in this football game. There was no point in time did it seem like Clemson was ever going to do anything to really truly threaten Georgia, because Clemson doesn't have enough good players to do that. Yeah, they got some defensive linemen, and yeah, they got the linebackers we obviously like. They got a handful of guys that could play for Georgia, but the sheer number of capable players that Clemson has, just basic counting here, is nowhere near what Georgia's is. And that's true based on the recruiting part of this. And then when Georgia does the transfer thing, which, as we said, Clemson doesn't do at all, of course, that's more true there as well. In fact, Kirby Smart on Saturday after the game was kind of asked about that. The fact that, everybody says Dabo Swinney doesn't bring these transfer players in, but you'll at least bring in a few. And, of course, guys like London Humphreys and Colby Young, transfer players, were part of the big breakthrough for Georgia, scoring touchdowns in the third quarter of this game. Kind of Kirby sort of talked about that contrast there a little bit, at least being willing to say what players like that, if you choose the right ones, what they bring to a program like Georgia. This was Kirby Smart after the game.
Yeah, that's hard for me to speak on. I'm not judgment of someone else. I guess you're not asking me to judge their program. You're saying how the transfer guys have helped our program. We're very selective in the transfer department. We take a tight end out of Stanford who's played in a similar offense, 2 tight end sets. We take a wideout who we play against and can run, and we need wideouts because we lost guys at wideout. We take Colby, who's a high-quality kid. We talk to these kids, we visit with these kids, and if I want my team to stay my team. I've always said that. If you could give me every kid I sign, they stay at my program for 4 years and they can't leave, I would take that every day of the week. But if we're going to lose kids, we've got to replace them with high-quality kids that are character kids that are looking to have an opportunity to win a championship. They want to go somewhere and play, because otherwise you can't survive in the SEC without the depth you need. So it's a forced situation. You have to use it. So we use it selectively because we actually like signing high school players that can develop, and the guys that you see in our program most of the time are that.
That quote right there from Kirby Smart is why, for me, and also for many of you, this game was easy to predict, because that's the kind of effort that Kirby Smart goes through with every spot he has on his roster. As he says, He's obsessed with the recruiting part of this, the kind of thing where you bring in a player and have the potential of keeping him for 3 and 4 years. Those are the guys that he wants. Those are the guys that he wants to keep for the majority. The majority of those guys that he brings in, he wants to keep them for their full college career. And yet he's also still on a selective basis being willing to bring in some of those transfer players too and let them supplement the overall roster for UGA. And on Saturday, we saw a beautiful mix of that, of guys that Georgia's brought in from high school, in some cases guys fresh out of high school, and in other cases players who've had experience other places who've stepped onto the field. And all of that is this beautiful mix that just completely overwhelmed Clemson, because Clemson just doesn't have that level of talent. They just don't have that sheer number of potential contributors. And when you look at the two rosters on paper in black and white, the contrast is so obviously stark. And in addition to that, and this is where I think things also get pretty fun too, is that, Saturday was a day for Georgia to send a little bit of a message, perhaps to all of college football overall, but to the Clemson folks, maybe a little bit here too, and based on some of the stuff that some of the people kind of around that program have said. Everybody hates the way that Georgia just hoards all the good players, hoards all the wins, 40th straight regular season win. If you're not a Georgia fan, that's really annoying, and we can all understand that. If we were having to sit here and watch somebody else do the same thing, we'd be kind of annoyed by that too. So people are so desperate for what Georgia's doing on the field to come to an end that they will grab hold of any kind of narrative that perhaps suggests that this is going to end sooner rather than later. People are just desperate. They'll believe anything when they're desperate. There is a desperate attempt to believe that somehow that Georgia's just going to give all this up at some point in time and stop being what they were again on Saturday. And clearly Georgia's had, driving incidents, things like that. We kind of know all that's been going on. And people will use that, try to make it more than it is. Obviously, we believe that Trevor Etienne was suspended from Saturday's game. But people will just sort of grab hold of this and say, well, eventually, if you've got these kind of issues off the field, it's going to creep on to what you're doing on the field. And who are these guys that Kirby Smart's bringing in and all that kind of stuff. That's the another thing about Saturday that was just, I think, if you're a Georgia fan, so enjoyable, is the fact that some of the stuff that has perhaps been said about Georgia from time to time, and maybe even said about people kind of around the Clemson program here a little bit, Saturday's performance from UGA offered such a stern rebuke to all of that I think that you couldn't help but notice. And I was really happy after the game when Kirby Smart took the time to defend his program. The question came up to him of, kind of some of the stuff off the field and how that kind of, basically kind of creeps onto the field. But as Kirby Smart said, listen, when we bring in a transfer player, we're looking to be selective about who we bring in. We want good dudes who are also good football players. And there's no evidence that Georgia does anything other than that when it's looking for all the players on its roster there as well. So what Georgia got a chance to show you on the field on Saturday is not that this is just the best football team in America, but it has, as Kirby Smart would say, a program that's also committed to doing things the right way and cultivating a certain kind of physical and mental toughness that is obvious in moments like this when a program like Clemson, at one point in time was a national standard bearer, appears to not even be worthy of being on the same field with UGA. It's more than athleticism that is the difference in a game like that. And Kirby Smart kind of clapped back at some of the critics who were like, off the field issues and, Georgia's falling apart and things like that. Kirby Smart gave a very strong response to all that kind of stuff on Saturday. And this, for me, was also very fun, too, to hear Kirby giving a well-worded defense to his team. Take a listen to this.
Awesome. I wish you could talk to our players. I wish you could live in there and see our guys day to day and see Thomas Settles and Bryant Gant and all the people that stand up in front of our team and talk about connection and share their experiences. And, I mean, there's two of them sitting right there. You can ask them. They'll tell you. What you know in the inside is a lot more than what people can paint pictures to be outside. And people use it in negative recruiting, and they throw it out there, and it comes back to bite them too.
That last line kind of hangs in the air a little bit. People use this to negative recruit against us, and it comes back to bite them. Is that a reference? Dabo Swinney? I don't know. But that last line sort of hangs in the air a little bit, doesn't it? By the way, speaking of Dabo, we would say that we sort of saw this coming because what we've seen since Clemson was in the playoff, 6 years in a row, 2015 through 2020, 2 national championships during that span, that what Clemson was from a talent standpoint then to what it is now, there has been a huge erosion. And whether it's not being willing to take transfers, a mechanism that's available to you now, or just not recruiting very hard, just not having the sort of insatiable appetite for talent acquisition that seems to exist at Georgia, whatever it is that Clemson does not seem to be, Dabo Swinney, who, as I told you last week, I probably like more than some of y'all do, Dabo Swinney does not seem to be exactly breaking his back right now to prevent the obvious erosion of talent that's happening with the program. And I thought he was very interesting after the game on Saturday because he was very contrite. He was very willing to acknowledge that Georgia got overwhelmingly the best of his team there on Saturday, including several different times during that press conference, and Arkalee Manziel was in the room with him for this. But in that post-game press conference, just sort of saying, we got our butt kicked. In fact, let me let you hear a little bit of Dabo Swinney just having to kind of just sort of bend the knee to Kirby Smart after a game like this on Saturday. For those of you who kind of saw Clemson on top of the college football world for a long time, kind of beaten up on a pillow soft ACC, thinking, man, if my team got a chance to play that team, we'd show them that they don't, are not quite as good as they think they are. Well, Saturday, you finally got that chance, and here was Dabo Swinney acknowledging what we all saw with our own eyes.
Biggest thing is, that's when you get beat like that, that's on the head coach. That's on me. So it's just complete ownership of just a absolute crap second half, and just really disappointed. But I've done it long enough. This is sometimes you get your butt kicked, and we did today.
The thing that strikes me so much about Dabo Swinney right there is he seems legitimately surprised that this happened. I mean, he really, I don't think, saw this coming. And for me as a fan, like the one thing I would never want from my coach is to kind of not know what you don't know. Is it Dunning-Kruger? Is that what that's called? When the less expertise you have, the more expertise you think you have. And in this, or as Don Rumsfeld once said, like the known unknowns. I think that Dabo Swinney honestly thought that whatever magic the Clemson program used to have when it had guys like Brian Brzee or Miles Murphy or all those first-round defensive linemen that they had, I think he thought that was still sort of magically a part of the program just because of good vibes or something like that. And if I was a Clemson fan, I'd be really concerned about that. I really, really would. I think what Georgia did on Saturday was expose Clemson in such a way that I don't think you easily put back the pieces in all this. I don't think you just sort of brush this off and say, oh, that's okay, we lost to Georgia, we're going to get right back to it. I don't know that it necessarily is quite so easy there for Clemson, because if nothing changes, then obviously nothing changes. And I think Kirby Smart and the success that Georgia's had stands as an obvious example of how much stuff would need to change at Clemson for them to be able to compete in games like that. But ultimately, that's their problem. For Georgia, it was a day to stand tall. And it was a day to strike back and fire back at those who've said whatever about the program, whatever else. Georgia on Saturday got a chance to show you what it is all about. And in this version of college football in 2024, with schedules being tougher than they've ever been before, with the playoff being longer and more challenging than it's ever been before, what we saw after 1 week, there is nobody as well positioned as Georgia to handle whatever comes next in this very, very interesting season that's on the way. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We're glad to have you with us, no matter how you get to us. Video, normally radio. We'll take a day off on that, be back there tomorrow. Podcast, Apple, Spotify, everything else. Just happy to have you a part of the program. Thankful, that you join us here on a Labor Day holiday. Hope you're enjoying that. Also, so thankful for those who made DawgNation Invasion such a fun experience on Saturday. How great was that? So much fun being had. And, of course, today's show brought to you by our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. You know, holiday weekends like this, when a lot of folks are sort of thinking about home improvement and, you know, maybe upgrades they want to make to the home that they live in. Well, if it's time for you to make your home look better on the outside, feel better on the inside, it's time to have a conversation with one of those Pella experts about how you get that done by equipping your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. They look good. They feel good. They kind of use the best technology that's available, 37 time-tested innovations about, you know, kind of just how to get the most out of these windows, how to get the most out of that experience. That's what Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about. So you can schedule an in-home consultation, have one of the Pella experts come out and visit you and talk to you about what makes Pella Windows and Doors of Georgia truly viewed to be the best, and kind of talk about all of that. It's not a pressure consultation. They're not trying to push you towards something. They're simply trying to make sure you understand why so many homeowners in the Atlanta area across the state of Georgia have chosen Pella Windows and Pella Doors when it was time to take the best possible care of their home. Plus, as we roll into a brand new month here, brand new opportunity for savings from Pella there as well, because between now and September 30th, you can get 10% off all Pella projects, plus no interest if paid in full within 12 months. So big time saving opportunity there. Also, I want you to make note of this. We've been talking about Pella for a long time. We're going to make a slight change today, though, in the website that we're going to give you in terms of how you connect with them. So it's kind of streamlined, made a little bit more simple. So that's going to be good. It's simply PellaGA.com. Pella, of course, is P-E-L-L-A. PellaGA.com. Super simple website now. PellaGA.com for more on that. You can also give them a call, 678-638-1429. That's 678-638-1429. Pella Window and Door of Georgia, truly viewed to be the best. All right, here coming up in a couple of minutes, Jon Stinchcomb, going to kind of fill in the gaps. We're going to get into some of the stuff with John we haven't talked about yet. The specific wide receivers who help kind of explode onto the scene for Georgia. The debut for Nate Frazier. Interesting stuff with the Georgia offensive line and some rotation stuff we saw there. A lot of guys getting into play. We'll cover all of that coming up here in just a little bit with Jon Stinchcomb. But prior to that, I'm going to go around the doghouse here today, poured by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And are y'all familiar, if those of you who kind of do a lot of stuff on the internet, college football and things like that, you know the meme that exists around the Tennessee program? And this is, I think even now, even Vols fans sort of joke about this a little bit, about how obviously Tennessee hasn't won a national championship in essentially the internet era. Their most recent national championship took place in 1998. So in a lot of these different seasons when they're trying to, believe they have a chance to do something, the meme that sort of formed around Tennessee football was, it feels like 98. Hey, this year sort of feels like 98. And like I said before, I mean, they've been mocked by that by outside fans. I think even Tennessee fans themselves have sort of turned that into a little bit of a joke just because of how prevalent it kind of became around the program. But I was thinking about that sort of, it feels like 98, that meme, that slogan around the Tennessee program, because of something about Saturday's game for Georgia against Clemson. Now, as I was telling our video audience before our show began today, it's very hard to cover everything that can be covered from one game on one show like this. You just simply don't have enough time to. So one of the things I think we're going to end up doing a lot of tomorrow is talking about how much better the Georgia offense got in the second half. Why was there a slow start? How was it they improved? All that kind of stuff. We're going to kind of get into a lot of that on tomorrow's show. But for now, as we're around the doghouse board by Dr. Pepper, I want to talk about this for a minute, which is that the Georgia defense playing as well as it did on Saturday enabled Georgia to get off to a slow start offensively, which obviously it wouldn't have wanted to do, but without feeling too much pressure and getting even any tighter, and then all of a sudden having something that sort of turned into a game-long issue, is that Georgia, I think, played well enough defensively that Georgia was able to finally find its confidence offensively, and whether they, thought this, consciously or not, they sort of knew that the defense had things under control. So the moment we sort of figure stuff out, all of a sudden this is a game that's going to be fine. And, much like the old Tennessee thing about it feels like 98, there was an element of Saturday for me that sort of felt like 21. It sort of felt like, and I'm not here to tell you, this Georgia defense is going to be as good as it was in 2021. That's not what I'm saying. But there was definitely sort of a return to a 2021 vibe around, this game because, Georgia didn't give up a touchdown. And last year, there were only 2 moments in the 2023 season when Georgia didn't give up a touchdown. One was to Ball State and one was to Florida State. Other than that, every opponent they saw found the end zone against UGA. Well, back in 2021, there were 4 games in which Georgia did not allow a touchdown that year. Good teams like Arkansas, good teams like Clemson. It was actually that moment that Carson Beck, who was on the 2021 roster, he was asked about, hey, earlier this week you talked about seeing that Georgia defense, play so well against Clemson in 2021. Well, lo and behold, your guys go out there and they play really well again. And Carson gave a very honest answer to all of this. But on Saturday for me, with Georgia only giving up, 2.13 yards per rush once you subtract the club lost yardage, 4.89 yards per pass allowed. When you start thinking about, all those kind of numbers, it felt like 21 for me a little bit of a throwback to the 2021 defense. This is what Carson Beck said about seeing that defense going out and playing so well against Clemson and realizing, what? We got to battle that defense every week during practice. I thought Carson gave a very good and candid answer to all of that when he was asked about the comparison between the two defenses on Saturday afternoon. Here's Carson Beck.
Yeah, well, I have to play against our defense every single day, and I don't enjoy it very much either. So, I mean, they're phenomenal. The things that, they're able to do and the multitude of defense that they're able to play, I mean, that's a credit to, their intelligence on the defensive side of the ball. And then not only that, but going out there and executing the plan and Coach Schumann calling the plays and the players actually going out there and doing it and performing. Like I said, I absolutely hate playing against our defense every day, but, I think that's what makes our offense get better and better. But to watch them go out there, it makes our job a little bit easier. We have good field position, and we're really not too worried about the other team scoring.
No doubt. You can't get a much better compliment than that of I hate playing against these guys during practice. And the premise of that question was, what they did in 2021, what they, were able to go out there and do on Saturday. And obviously one of the things that made the 2021 defense for Georgia so special was the presence of some elite playmakers, household names across all of college football. And if Georgia's going to have anything close to that similar level of performance here this year, once again, household names have to emerge. Well, guess what? On Saturday, it certainly seems like one of those kind of did. It certainly seemed like, a guy that's already well-known to Georgia fans perhaps introduced himself to the rest of the country there as well. Of course, I'm talking about Malachi Starks, whose interception on Saturday was so reminiscent of what he had done in his first college game against Oregon, same building a couple of years ago, if not athletically, maybe even better. I mean, great job by our producer, Jay Black, to get some of the still images of that interception so you get the idea of just how fully extended he is to bring that home. Just an amazing, amazing play and a part of just a phenomenal day for Georgia defensively that should not get lost in the rest of the conversation. Georgia was as Georgia as it ever was in terms of the fact that it didn't give Clemson anything on Saturday. And after the game, Malachi Starks talked about the role that his eye-popping highlight of an interception played in all of that. He had some fun with that moment. Here's Malachi Starks.
It was really just, I was guarding him, and he had released outside, and I didn't think the ball was coming. And then when his speed changed, I saw the ball was coming, so I just wanted to look and lean and get in position to make the play. And I think I jumped a little too early, but it ended up working out fine.
I would say it worked out pretty fine there as well. Quite a day for the Georgia defense. We're going to get into all the stuff that matters from the game, but you cannot, especially after a couple of moments last year, we had some questions about the Georgia defense. And I'm not saying we don't have some questions about this unit even going into the rest of this season too. I'm not saying that. Man, you got to give credit where credit's due. And this definitely felt like a throwback to a couple of years ago for me on Saturday. So much fun to see. And you certainly think that a lot of the rest of college football is going to be as miserable playing against this group this year as Carson Beck says he is every day during practice. So you love to think about all of that. And that is Around the Doghouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. First of all, huge thanks to Dr. Pepper for being a part of our DawgNation Invasion, tailgate on Saturday, one of our great sponsors there and all of that. We love the fact they make it all fun. And, of course, they're a big part of everything that's going on with the college football season there as well. I actually really like the new Fansville commercial about the hype train. The quarterback gets hurt, then everybody's got to be kicked off the hype train. I think that's really fun. I think they do a great job with all of those. And, of course, as you're settling in, we got another game tonight. You got Florida State and Boston College tonight. True story. Last night, I was sitting out in the back porch watching the trying to get a little exercise because gosh knows I need it. So I came back in, sat down to watch Florida State, LSU and USC, popped open an ice cold Dr. Pepper to enjoy while I was watching the game because that really is the way that I like to watch college football. And so as you're settling in to watch some college football here tonight or next weekend or whenever, the delicious one-of-a-kind flavor of the ice cold Dr. Pepper is a great way for you to do that. So as you're shopping at your local Kroger or wherever it is you're picking up your groceries, pick up some Dr. Pepper because it's not college football season until someone breaks out the delicious ice-cold Dr. Pepper. It's a pepper thing, and we're glad to have Dr. Pepper a part of Around the Doghouse here today. All right, so we got a lot to cover, and we're running a little bit late, so let's get to it here real quick. A lot more on how Georgia got it done against Clemson on Saturday. Let's bring on the great former Georgia All-American Jon Stinchcomb here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Jon Stinchcomb. Obviously, a lot to talk about after what goes down between Georgia and Clemson on Saturday. So, John, let me start kind of broad and big picture here. I think there's a lot to be impressed by. What were your, biggest, most obvious takeaways from what Georgia was able to do?
One was the dominance. Obviously, second half, the offense got rolling, but the ability to play against a good opponent. I mean, Clemson they think highly of themselves. They came in with high expectations and were certainly swinging hard, if you will. But the performance for the defense stands out. Malachi Starks, not only his ability to make plays on the back end, we saw the interception, which was exceptional athleticism. But I went back and watched the film from both sides of the ball, and his versatility, his ability to make plays in the box, they used him in a variety of roles and asked him to do a wide assortment of things, cover in tight spaces, cover as a corner, play the run, get kind of nasty and dirty in the box. It was exceptional. It was fun to watch. And just the versatility of this defense, the variety pack of pressures that they brought, the movement they had up front, it was fun. So other side of the ball, obviously the emergence of Nate Frazier. Much has been made about him during this training camp, and to see that live and in action, it's fun. I'm excited for him. I'm also excited once we get the rest of the backs up and running and healthy, what that could look like for this Georgia offense.
So we haven't talked a ton about the offense on the show so far today. I want to do more with you on Nate Frazier specifically here in a moment. But if I'm being honest, of course I wasn't thrilled with what I was seeing from Georgia offensively in the first quarter of that game. It kind of lingered for most of the first half. Third quarter, completely different. What was the change attributed to in your mind? Was it halftime adjustments? I know Kirby Smart talked some about that, and you sort of saw something from Clemson, then you chose to exploit it. Was it Carson Beck getting more comfortable? Maybe he was playing better in the third quarter than he perhaps would have played in the first, maybe taking more of a time or giving things a chance to unfold in front of him a little bit more. What would you attribute the breakout performance in the third quarter compared to sort of not really seeing that in the first half?
Yeah, a couple things that I saw that made the biggest difference. One is Nate Frazier made guys miss. Clemson was playing with an extra defender in the box the entire game. And there's three ways that you can address that. You can change formations to try to bring in extra bodies. You can scheme it up and try to bring in receivers to try to dig out that safety that it was number 9, primarily Mickens, that was the extra defender in that space. So it kind of took away the run game. Or the third option, which is what I saw more than anything, is fine, you're going to play an extra defender in the box. We're going to utilize those one-on-one matchups on the edges. And Georgia's offense created some confusion. You saw some open wide receivers just on the route combinations and just overall execution. For the run game specifically, it wasn't blocked up, in my opinion, any better or worse the second half as it was the first half. What I saw a big difference was the ability of the running backs to make guys miss and create their own opportunities. for a number of times, whether it was Cash Jones or Nate Frazier. Both those guys in the second half, one-on-one in the hole with either a safety or an unblocked edge player. One time it was a linebacker. They make a miss for big yardage, and that's to their credit. Offensive line-wise, as I'm reviewing the film, the guys played solid. Many times it's hat on a hat. Now, can they play better? Yes. I think our guards played exceptionally well. I think there's room for improvement in other spaces, but overall, it was more of the running backs making guys miss in the second half and softening up the defense a little bit by connecting on some passes that made those safeties and edge players one half step slower and created space for our running backs.
So I want to talk about Nate Frazier here for a moment. You brought him up. Obviously, and Cash Jones has a really good day too. But in the case of Frazier, John, like we sort of live, I'm talking about me on the show, people who watch and listen to the show, we sort of live in a world of like rumor and speculation because in the build-up to the start of the season, the kind of unverified rumor and innuendo outpaces like confirmed facts by about a 10-1 margin, if not a 20-1 margin, right? I mean, it's like if you're going to come on here and talk about Georgia football on a daily basis, a lot of what you're going to be talking about is what like so-and-so said to so-and-so who heard that from his next-door neighbor who talked to, a rich booster. Like that's just sort of like just the nature of the conversation. So I cannot tell you how happy it makes me when one of these rumors turns out to be true because it sort of makes it feel like, okay, well, everything we've been doing for the last however many months has not completely been in vain because the telephone game of, gosh, did you hear about Nate Frazier and he did this and he had a long touchdown when, so-and-so was at the practice and whatever else. Like all of a sudden that kind of stuff turns out to be true. So for everybody who contributed to the Georgia rumor mill over the course of the last, couple of months, I think they can all take a bow and take a big win here because all of them got it right. And to the extent that we amplified what the rumor mill had been saying, I guess we sort of got it right too. So I'm happy that Georgia has a good running back, but I'm also happy that the whispers and the people who know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, I'm happy that they turned out to be right on this too. That makes it more fun for me as well.
Absolutely, and I'm almost grateful that he had the opportunity. You hear Coach Smart at the end of the game, and he wasn't one to fan the flames of the Nate Frazier craze and fire that's raging around what he could be for this Georgia offense. As a matter of fact, he was one of the first to say, he's got to do better in blitz pickup, and we got to be able to trust him in more situations if he's going to earn more or carve out more time to get the ball. But I also think that it's because of Etienne's unavailability that allowed that space for us to see what Nate Frazier really can bring to the table. And what we'd heard through camp and from all the scrimmages and those firsthand reports is that he's got a burst. And we got to see that on Saturday. So this Clemson defense, I thought, was really good. Their front four, specifically number 11, Woods, he's a player. But, yeah, they're big bodies. It's tough to move them. They clogged up the holes. And what we saw is Frazier brought that burst that it took to get to the edge and, make that one cut through the line and then accelerate away from defenders. And on the other side, I think that's what Georgia does exceptionally well. We've got linebackers and second level and third level players that run with such exceptional speed that they don't have the opportunities. Opposing offenses don't have the opportunities that guys like Nate Frazier can create just because of the overall speed of Georgia's defense. So along those same lines, Cash Jones, a guy that Kirby continues to, as much as he was dousing water on the flames of the Nate Frazier fire, he was in promoting Cash Jones and what he brought to the table. So his reliability, and then we saw his playmaking ability. Again, there was an unblocked defender in Cash's face. He makes a miss and goes on for a touchdown. So it's fun to watch guys, one, that have been a part of a program for a long time earn it, and two, for some of these new up-and-comers that we've only heard stories about kind of come into their own and flash as the playmakers that we hope them to be.
So you touched on this a little earlier. I want to kind of follow up on this, whether it be some of the stuff that Cash did on Saturday or obviously Nate Frazier, who we were talking about. When you're making defenders miss in space, how much of an extra element does that give your offense? Because, I mean, it just certainly seemed like that, almost like the sixth man coming off the bench in basketball, when Frazier came in and all of a sudden he's showing a burst or showing a wiggle or showing, those different elements, it just sort of seemed like there was just an energy created by that became contagious for everybody else. I mean, it sounds like you sort of saw some of that too.
Absolutely. I think it feeds itself, right? As an offense, you start to get this feeling, whether it's in a game where they're creating opportunities, it's like, we can't do wrong, right? And then everybody plays to a higher level. On the flip side of that, as a defense, the defensive coordinator saying, man, I'm putting you in the right places, and we still can't stop them. We still can't make those plays. And so it's deflating on one side, and then it builds confidence on the other. Everybody's game gets lifted, in my opinion. That's why they say, you can't stop the Big Mo, and it's because momentum is real. You've created opportunities, and one side of the ball feels like, hey, we can elevate our game right now, and they can't stop us. And the other side is going, man, we can't do much right now. We've got to right the ship. So when guys like Cash or Nate Frazier, and even the opportunities that were created, the Dylan Bell play and Humphreys, some of the transfer guys, the touchdown from Colby, you start making plays across the board, and it lifts all ships. Everybody feels like, hey, we've got something going now. This is what we expect. And I don't want to overlook the fact that Carson Beck is and performed like, if not the best quarterback in college football, one of the very best, because his management, his decision-making, his ability to get the ball in the right places and to the right people, I think was certainly highlighted specifically in the second half. But there were some opportunities that, maybe it wasn't the perfect ball, but he was getting it to the right people nonetheless, even in that first half. So I think what we saw was just a microcosm of what this offense can be, and it was against a good team. So it's exciting for this offense to see what they might be capable of this season.
I've said this before. The video we're showing on the screen today is incredible, including the touchdown from Nate Frazier, where I don't know if it's intentional or not, but you had the homage, what looked like Todd Gurley with the bow, the jazz hands with Sony Michel. So I don't know how much of that was intentional by Frazier, but it was certainly a cool thing to be able to see. Let's talk transfer receivers here for a minute, too. And, once again, when it comes to Colby Young, like, I'm not an X's and O's expert. It's why I like having guys like you on the show, because you can fill in gaps that are going to be left with my, lack of firsthand football knowledge. But in the case of Young, this seemed fairly obvious to me. This was a guy that scored touchdowns for Miami offense a year ago, that sometimes touchdowns were hard to come by. I mean, that this was not an explosive Miami offense, and yet Young had a pretty productive season. He's a big guy, seems to be a pretty strong guy. It just seemed obvious that this would be a real red zone threat for Georgia. Well, lo and behold, that's exactly what happened on Saturday. Carson Beck had the easiest touchdown throw of his life to the big, tall Colby Young, who was essentially used exactly as most of us sort of thought that he would be. On the subject of transfer receivers, let's start with that. Like, how valuable do you think that appears to be the rest of the season for Georgia?
What was the question we had when Brock Bowers leaves is how can we score in the red zone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how are we going to replace that productivity? And what we saw the very first play in the red zone is they go 3-by-1, isolate Colby Young one-on-one with a defensive back, and they use his frame to create what looked like a fairly easy touchdown pass to get the ball rolling for this Georgia offense. And I think that's exactly what they envisioned when they brought in him as a transfer. And that's what Georgia does, right? They look at the skill sets and say, how can they complement what we have? How can we utilize them? And is it a good fit? Georgia is not going to ever, in my opinion, I don't foresee this coming. We're never going to lead the league in number of transfers received. But what we do want to do is make sure that they're the right fit and they can help what we already have. What we saw with Colby in that red zone situation is his skill set. We can find ways to utilize, right? That's just hopefully a taste of what's to come. And then London Humphreys, just his ability to create across the middle. It's something that we saw him do at Vandy pretty consistently. And it's another one of those pieces that the rotation at Georgia at wide receiver is strong. There's a lot of depth there. If anything, when we had that panel talking with Jake and Terrence, is we might not have that one singular marquee guy, but we've got a lot of depth and we've got a lot of variety in skill sets. And another guy that I think is worth mentioning is Arian Smith. Look at the number of ways they tried to get him the ball. They're trying to integrate him into this offense early and often in a variety of ways, not just the go route that we've known him for, right? Just not running past defenders. I think what Coach Bobo and this entire offense is trying to do is highlight the fact that he is more than just what we've labeled him as, which is a deep threat. And I think once you start mixing in the various skill sets that Georgia receivers have, it makes this unit as a whole much stronger and much more dangerous for a defense.
All right, I want to spend a couple more minutes. I want to be respectful of your time here on a holiday Monday, but you said something about London Humphrey that I think is really important. I think that people lose sight of this. And I said this on our postgame show on Saturday. You make a case that Humphrey was one of like the two most productive freshman receivers in the entire SEC last year. Last year was not a year in which a ton of freshman receivers necessarily did big things. You had the Wilson guy at Florida. Humphrey, even against Georgia, did a couple of nice things. Like him coming to UGA after having played in the SEC last season, even if it was only at Vanderbilt, that's not a small thing. Like he did not wilt in the moment on Saturday, had a huge third down catch, had a touchdown. He's got the sort of lateral quickness that also, I think, creates a real spark for the Georgia offense. But this is a guy with SEC experience, and that is a valuable commodity. I think what we saw from Humphrey on Saturday was likely not a one-time thing. I think that Humphrey's probably a pretty significant part of the Georgia offensive story here this season.
Now, I see Humphreys as this year's Dom Lovett, where Dom Lovett was super productive at Missouri and had to, for lack of a better word, humble himself to be a part of something bigger than just him. Missouri relied on him constantly. That's what Vandy did with Humphreys last year, is we realize how exceptional you are on our roster, and we're going to pump it for all it's worth. And guys come here and realize that this is a deep roster, and specifically for wide receivers, there is a number of very capable bodies, and it's not going to be a singular focus unless, there's like a Brock Bowers in the bunch. But they still found ways to get Ladd the ball and Dillon the ball and, spread around. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint last year. So that's the way Georgia is built, is team first. And I think guys recognize that and are still willing to come and participate and fill their role. Let me throw in one more transfer guy that stood out to me, and it certainly didn't stand out when I watched the game on Saturday. It was only when I went back and watched the film. But Urasek, the tight end transfer from Stanford, did a lot of the dirty work in the run game on the edges. So may not have popped in receiving yards, but you look at some of the run plays and who's at the point of attack. It's the transfer from Stanford. So all three guys, two wide receivers and a tight end, that certainly assisted Georgia and found ways to contribute, some on the stat sheet and others that were not.
That's great to hear, John. I'm really happy about that. Let me squeeze in one tiny final thing here. We saw Georgia rotating on the offensive line almost from the word go. And this is one of those things, as the week goes on, we'll do some of what you just did right there. Okay, you go back and look at, this guy was actually doing some stuff, and that guy was doing some stuff. Interesting that Georgia, we know that Micah Morris is going to play, and I thought Dylan Fairchild had what I could tell a very good game. But we saw Monroe Freeling at right tackle pretty early. I think he played some left tackle there too. That Georgia, a little bit like it did certainly in 2022 and probably last year there as well, is going to do some rotating there with the offensive line. What did you make of that, maybe of Freeling in particular here, and the fact that Georgia is as interested as ever in cultivating a lot of depth beyond its sort of five starters there with the offensive line?
Yeah, I was excited to see the rotation, right? Micah Morris, we know he's arguably the most powerful offensive lineman in this Georgia depth chart. So big, strong, powerful guy. You want to find ways to get him on the field. He's earned it. We also, in my opinion, have one of the best starting guard combos in the country, certainly in the SEC. Tate Ratledge and Fairchild are really, really talented guards. So to have Micah Morris come in as a third is it's a luxury that a lot of teams, they'd wish they had one of those three bodies.
Yeah.
And then at tackle, so Monroe Freeling comes in, starts off in rotation at right tackle. His first pass set is an aggressive jump set. And I'm going, wow, I like this guy's confidence for someone who, this is his first real opportunity to be that rotational guy at that tackle. He also swung over to the left side. So I'm really encouraged. We've got 7 very capable guys that are only going to get better. And that's what I think is fun to watch, is that will make everyone better. I think that makes Ernest Green better. I think that makes Xavier Truss better on the outside, knowing that there's that third tackle that's going to rotate in, and he's capable. So to earn that playing time, you have to play at a really high level that's inside and outside, both at tackle and guard position. So I was encouraged by what I saw. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. I think we have some of the best guards in the country, and Monroe Freeling certainly looked like more than capable. It wasn't just a young player that's looking for development time. I think he looks capable as a major contributor on this offensive front.
John, so valuable, especially when we get your insight on stuff like that you see so clearly. We appreciate it here today. Hope you and your family have a nice Labor Day opportunity here to enjoy some stuff here coming up too. And, of course, the season has arrived, gets off to a great start. Fun to be doing this with you each week. Thank you for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. And I look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Always enjoy it, especially when we get to talk about real games where Georgia's winning. So it's fun times. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Outstanding stuff from Jon Stinchcomb. You knew that it would be. Also, in the midst of that conversation, I noticed a couple of the comments, asking about some of those injury things. It is just before 11 a.m. right now, so we're recording this live. That means Kirby Smart press conference about an hour. Obviously, Kirby will be asked about the latest on Mikael Williams, latest on Warren Brinson, any additional news on that. I know Dylan Bell, going back to Saturday, said that he was just dealing with cramps. So we'll take him at his word on that, and we'll see what we get. But if we're being completely honest, given the fact that it's Tennessee Tech for the home opener on Saturday, some of these things may linger a little bit, right? Clearly Kirby Smart's not going to open up the book and just tell you every single, detail of the medical history for these players here today. That's not really his style. And given the opponent, this is one of those things, we've seen this from Georgia before, where it's like, you get the big win, you sort of prove what you need to, then you kind of go into your shell a little bit. I almost wonder if you see some of that from Saturday, on Saturday from Georgia, where, guys are, getting, I hope that's not the case. And obviously we'll have some fun stuff coming up ahead of Saturday. But you probably think that Georgia has now earned the right to be pretty protective if some of these guys are a little banged up. And so we'll see what we get from Kirby on that with the press conference coming up later today. We're about to have some fun looking at a couple of SEC coaches under fire. We're going to do some of this here coming up in a minute. But prior to that, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And one of my favorite things about our DawgNation Invasion tailgate on Saturday, how many folks who were there who are DawgNation cruisers. This was such a great thing to be able to see. Just folks we've had fun with, and folks that are already signed up to be a part of our cruise coming up in April on Utopia of the Seas. And I'm telling you right now, and I even had a few folks come up to me and said, BA, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be on this DawgNation cruise. We're going to get it done here in 2025. I just love that, because it's a chance to do what we do for a DawgNation Invasion tailgate for a couple of hours. And we have, over the course of the year, have a few opportunities to do this. But the DawgNation cruise ends up being our way of doing this for several days. And that sort of being almost like a DawgNation summer camp, where you get to know people in a way that you just would not know. And I consider a lot of the folks who've been on our DawgNation cruises with us, I think of them as friends for life. And I think that you will as well when you meet some of the good dog people who do this with us. So I want you to reach out to Jessica Slater. I want you to give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can email her as well, jslater@dreamvacations.com, and she'll tell you all about the DawgNation cruise. And I was happy to be on the tailgate on Saturday telling all the folks who've already signed up. It's wait till you see everything that Utopia of the Seas has in store for you. It's going to be a remarkable experience. So make sure you're ready to go on all of that. All right, let's do this. What a weekend it was, because when you have the early game, when you take care of your business, whether you are at the game coming home or you just sit in front of the TV all day long, eventually you can sort of kick back and relax. And I'll put my feet up on the desk here. You'll see I wore shorts today in honor of the holiday. But you sort of kick back and relax. You just sort of watch the other games that are taking place here. How much fun was it to see Florida just absolutely kicked in the teeth all day long at the hands of the Miami Hurricanes? And trust me, we're not done for a long shot when it comes to all the bad stuff coming out about Florida after this game. But there was one moment post-game, and many of you have kind of seen this. I mean, you talk about beautiful. Billy Napier standing up there. He's trying to explain the loss. And after embarrassing himself on the field the way that his team played, well, now he gets embarrassed at the podium for a completely different reason. He couldn't get the water bottle unscrewed, couldn't get the sort of nervous energy trying to just, fumble around. Could not get it unscrewed. I want to let you see the clip here, and then I think we have a little deeper look at the Napier taking an L from a water bottle after having taken the L from the Hurricanes. This is very funny. Let's take a look at this.
What do we have? Go ahead.
Yeah, Coach. I mean, given the experience and how confident you were in this team going into the season, just how disappointing and surprising was this performance?
Yeah. I mean, it's embarrassing, to be quite honest with you. Yep. That's how I feel. That's how our kids feel. And we've got a decision to make. I think we have.
So our producer, Jay Black, always doing an excellent job, has done the homework 8 times that Napier tries to twist it. Now, the funniest part, and if you're not watching a video, you missed this. At the end, he really tries to get it. Like the first time, it's like, okay, I'm kind of, messing with it, kind of messing with it. Like at the end, now he's like, he's had enough, and he's about to get this thing unscrewed, and he still can't do it. And he eventually just sort of has to put it back down. Just have to wave the white flag. Like there is nothing that speaks to the ineptitude of Napier on Saturday more than just going at this bottle, man. He's trying to get that cap off. He wants the refreshment this water bottle can provide him. He wants that parched lips after, having yelled at his players and, nervous about job security. He wants to soothe himself with some cold water, or at least, coldish water. Cannot get that thing unscrewed. Now, there was also the thing on Saturday about, I guess somebody put out there that he had to be separated from the Florida mascot. That's not true. That people put these fake things on social media all the time. And, you almost hate when the fake stuff comes out because it takes away from the real thing there. And trust me when I tell you, that was a real thing. Napier could not get the water bottle unscrewed. Like, what a loser, man. Like it is just ending for him in such an embarrassing fashion. I mean, you just hate to see it. You just hate to see it if you're a Florida fan. Oh, my gosh. Look, if they're going to get blown out by Miami, they may lose 10 games. And I was thinking about this. I mean, we've built so much of a cottage industry around, making fun of Dan Mullen, and before that, Jim McElwain. Like, with McElwain, you had the shark, which was also fake, but still somehow sort of stuck to him. Mullen's got all kinds of stuff. Somehow Billy Napier is going to have an entire career at Florida without ever really, getting any kind of, true shtick that we were able to really grab hold of and make fun of. Maybe now that's what it is. Maybe he's the water boy from now on. Maybe finally that's what Billy Napier is. Maybe, Sunbelt Billy kind of works a little bit. Some people call him Sling Blade because he looks like, what's his name, Billy Bob Thornton a little bit from the movie. Maybe he's just the water boy. I mean, maybe the biggest L of Napier's career is going to be the water bottle after the game. I still don't know if that's quite as bad as what Dan Mullen being dressed like Darth Vader. It's not quite as bad as that, I don't think. But nonetheless bad. And by the way, Dan Mullen having a good time watching all this play out right now there as well. All right, speaking of SEC teams playing terrible in non-conference games, you also had that last night with Brian Kelly and LSU, what I thought was a really embarrassing loss. And, look, Lincoln Riley was rumored to be a candidate while he was still at Oklahoma for the LSU job and didn't want anything to do with it. And then left Oklahoma to go to USC when he sort of found out that, Oklahoma was going to be in the SEC. it certainly felt like Riley was a little bit afraid of the SEC. Riley's star has also dropped mightily at USC the last couple of years. They've just been a pretty sloppy operation. And if you're LSU, given that backstory and given the fact that in Brian Kelly's tenure alone, now their week 1 losses predate Brian Kelly, but in Brian Kelly's tenure alone, they lost to Florida State the first game of the season back-to-back years. Like, you can't do that and then come out here and lose this game to Lincoln Riley and USC, given all the negativity that existed around that program in Los Angeles. Like, you just can't do this. I thought this was a really, really bad night for Brian Kelly and for LSU. I think it brings all kinds of questions up about what Kelly's overall level of leadership for this program is right now. And this is a guy, when he was at Notre Dame, with somewhat lesser talent, than the big boys truly have. He's beaten all the unranked foes. He's winning games as a favorite, but it was time to face a team that has kind of a high level of talent. Kelly always wilted. Those Notre Dame teams didn't win. And lo and behold, even what's supposed to be kind of an upgraded level of talent at LSU, he sort of brought the same thing to the table. Now, last night after the game, post-game press conference, he was ready to show everybody he was mad and he was not going to take it anymore. Brian Kelly kind of showing some emotion about his team and how they played against USC. This is what I thought was a fairly fake attempt to conjure that up, Brian Kelly after the game.
And we're sitting here again. We're sitting here again talking about the same things. About not finishing when you have an opponent in a position to put them away. But what we're doing on the sideline is feeling like the game's over. And I'm so angry about it that I got to do something about it. I'm not doing a good enough job as a coach. And I got to coach him better, because it's unacceptable for us not to have found a way to win this football game. It's ridiculous.
Dion in our YouTube comment section brings up the family thing from Brian Kelly. And I'm here to tell you, for me, what you just heard if you're listening podcast, what you just saw if you're watching video, is just as fake as that. I mean, doesn't that come across as a guy, Brian Kelly, who'd be like, what would an actual human being do in a situation like this? They might show some anger. That's what I'm going to do there as well. I'm going to go into that post-game press conference, and I'm going to show people how mad I am. I'm going to slam my fist down, because that's what I've seen other humans do in a situation like that. And so I'm going to show my humanity by a totally contrived act of anger. Slam my fist down. It just seems really, really fake. And I just think that's the disconnect, where Kelly has won enough games in his career. He's clearly a good coach. Clearly a good coach. But in this particular case, I just think he's too fake to connect authentically with the LSU players. I think he's showing a pretty poor level of leadership with that team here right now. And when you also connect this too with what he said, back during the summer, after they made a big deal about wanting to upgrade their defensive line, saying that on the record that's what they wanted to do, he then acknowledged that, hey, we didn't pull the trigger on spending the NIL dollars that was going to require us to have to bring that in. Although, as I just saw on video, to his credit, he was able to open up the water bottle. So I guess from that standpoint, he's a little bit better than Billy Napier was, because he at least got the water bottle open at that little diatribe. But, LSU, for my entire lifetime, has had a good defense. All of a sudden, now they can't find defensive players. They can't stop this sloppy operation that is USC, Lincoln Riley's bad clock management. They can't do all that. I think that was pretty bad. All right, a couple of other things here. Noted SEC troll Danny Cannell climbed out from under a rock last night. Obviously, he got stuffed into a locker by Georgia Tech last weekend, but shook free of all of that to let you know that the SEC, other than obviously Georgia, did not have a very good game against non-conference foes. Cannell putting on X, you won't hear this on any ESPN show, but of the 4 marquee non-conference games, the SEC went 1-3. Now, this is not new from Cannell, and frankly, I like pro wrestling, so Cannell shtick's not always, I think it's sometimes kind of entertaining. Can I see it on the screen one more time, though, if you don't mind? Yeah, go back to the Cannell thing if we can just for 1 second. The thing that I find remarkable about this, look at the numbers that Cannell did for relatively benign opinion. 1 million views, 1.8 thousand reposts, 16,000 likes. boy, people love the idea of the SEC having a bad first weekend, don't they? I mean, that's a tweet that's, I would say not all that remarkable, and yet it does fairly big numbers because people like the idea of that. And you know what? LSU should have played better. And Florida, I mean, I love when Florida loses, but in terms of representing the SEC, you can't get blown out in your own stadium. You're a 2-point underdog. And, we'll probably do more of A&M later on this week. Like, I'm so tired of hearing about Kyle Field and this unbelievable home field advantage created by the 12th man. They lose at home all the time. They were a favorite in this game against Notre Dame. Lost by 10 points? I mean, in a roundabout way, Cannell is somewhat right. These SEC teams like A&M and LSU, Florida, they're supposed to be like big-time programs. They have big followings, supposed to be big-time programs. They're not doing anything to help the SEC's reputation right now. Now, Georgia doesn't need the help. Georgia will take care of it on its own. But at a certain point in time, you do have to say, A&M, if you're going to cash the check, do something to, support the league. LSU, if you're going to cash the check, don't go to Las Vegas, get drunk, and get beat and come back home. Do something to support the league. And roundabout way, I don't think Cannell's necessarily 100% wrong on this. Florida, LSU, A&M, these teams kind of in the middle part of the SEC, Florida's at the bottom, they do need to play a little bit better than that. I don't necessarily have a problem saying that. One more thing here real quick. Ratings are out on some of these week 1 games, and they are phenomenal, in the Georgia game in particular. I'm going to show you this that ESPN shared from its PR staff. So here's the viewers. So Notre Dame, Texas A&M, no surprise, 8.2 million. That's the most watched Saturday night football game in 2 years. So massive, massive ratings for that. But how about this? 7.9 million viewers tuned in to watch Georgia at noon against Clemson. It is the most watched week 1 noon game on record, far outpacing the Florida-Miami game at 3:30. Now, some of that's because it's number 1 Georgia. But here's the takeaway I wanted to give you just for a moment. I think a lot of us have the belief that the noon start is worse than the other starts. And in terms of the fact that you have to wake up super early and your tailgate is shortened and it's blazing hot if you're in an outdoor stadium, the noon start is pretty bad. But the one thing we got to shake free of is the idea that it's a slap in the face to play at noon because you're somehow relegated to a worse television window. Look at how many people are watching games at noon. That's why Georgia gets forced to sometimes play at noon, because that's the kind of TV audience that you have a chance to draw. For whatever reason, with, what was supposed to be a more competitive game, fewer people watching Miami, Florida than watching Georgia Clemson at noon. So I don't like noon starts. I like longer tailgates. Everything about a little later start is better. But, this idea that somehow it's a slap in the face to play at noon, when you're drawing TV ratings like that at noon, it's not a slap in the face. It's an idea of the SEC and now the ESPN ABC family trying to take advantage of the TV audience that exists there. I think you got to sort of point that out. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, we've had a fun show here today. Let me also remind you that tonight, brand new time for On the Beat with Mike Griffith. Cody Chafin's a part of that there as well. They'll get you going tonight, 7 p.m. All of our evening shows from now on are all going to be 7 p.m. there, including On the Beat here tonight. So fun one coming. It's Labor Day, but we're all over here on DawgNation, including On the Beat tonight, 7 p.m. Hope you will check that out. All right, a bunch of golden shoes to give you here before we wrap things up here today. Let me start with this. Hearing from a couple of guys that are big parts of our DawgNation community here. Ryan Walker sharing a meme that I believe our buddy Mad Dog made, saying, handling business as usual, taking out the trash, only 11 more times to do this for the SEC championship game. Tagging me, DawgNation Daily, and of course, I believe our buddy Mad Dog made this graphic of the dog dragging out the Clemson trash bag. Really well done. Very clever stuff. Appreciate Ryan sharing that. Appreciate our buddy Mad Dog, who I believe made that. Speaking of Mad Dog, he also made this one there as well. How about this on the right? I reckon this is like AI generated. Is that how you do this these days? The Trojan standing over the tiger. Now, last night, if you saw, the Trojan had a hard time stabbing the field with the sword. Y'all see that? A little bit of an issue with that. But no problem piercing the tiger there. Mad Dog shares that. We'll give him a golden shoe for that. Also, how about this as a golden shoe? You talk about being just overwhelmed. I mean, stuff like this just fills me with so much joy. I just cannot tell you how much I appreciate that. Got an email, Eric Newberger and Kevin Mitchell sharing this, saying, rooting on the dogs from the Qatar chapter of DawgNation. How about that? Serving our country over there in Qatar. I hope I'm pronouncing the country's name right, too. Redneck from North Georgia. Sometimes you mess some of this stuff up. But from Qatar there, Eric and Kevin doing all of that. I mean, do you love to see the Georgia flag flying there? Folks serving our country, doing an amazing job. Just absolutely amazing. Just really, really appreciate that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your service to our country. Well-earned golden shoe going out to you today for sure there on that. Lousy, stinking Gators, as lousy and stinking as they ever were. Billy Napier can't open a water bottle. Florida's administration maybe open up a coaching search. It is just a mess. And it's been 1,395 days since they have beaten Georgia, and that is a number that's going to keep on going up and up and up and up. And that is our show for you today, DawgNation Daily and the Gator Hater Updater. We'll see you all back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Showing up on time, doing the work that's promised, the price is promised. Dari Payroll is also a big part of our DawgNation Invasion tailgate on Saturday there as well. And that was a really fun thing to see there, too. All right, we're going to get your comments. Going to roll through it all. Having a good time. Denise Loper, thank you for the kind words. She also says, so proud of those guys. Yeah, how about that? And, you know, we're so lucky to get these messages from time to time. Folks taking DawgNation with them, you know, overseas, serving our country, doing just an incredibly generous act for all of us, helping keep us to be free. Man, what an amazing thing that is. Scott Gentry says, so ready to quiet the teams like Bama, Tennessee, that just think because they scored big on a high school team that they are now somehow better. Yeah, Georgia gets its chance here coming up on that, Scott. You're right. Neil Calvino says, talk about being kicked while you're down. I almost feel bad for them. I believe that's about the lousy, stinking Gators. Yeah, we're going to revel in all of that for sure. Zach Adams looking at it tonight says, imagine a Boston College win over Florida State. Yeah, we'll be watching that one pretty close. I think Florida State probably wins, but I do think the Eagles have a chance to keep it closer than the experts think. Let's see. Bill Sanders says a noon kickoff is still a slap in the face, even if more people watch the game. Yeah, I mean, I get that, but it is certainly not thought to be a worse TV window. Let me just say it that way. Larissa Bessing says that it's a little easier to start drinking later in the day. I said I started at 12 on Saturday. I was done by 7. Hey, listen, some would say that's the right way to do it, right? It's like you get your fun early. By the time it's time for bed, you're already, kind of ready to go. There is a theory out there that would say that's the right way to do it. Tennille Calvino, thanks for the great, kind words. Appreciate that. I mean, I don't like the early tailgates. I mean, it is harder. Like the one thing, as obviously a very sophisticated member of the coastal elite broadcast media, one of the things that, I do is I get to the games very early. And normally, if it's a 3:30 or a night game, if you come to the game very early, if it's early enough in the morning, there's no traffic to speak of whatsoever. Now, when the noon start happens, obviously everybody comes earlier, so there's some logistics challenges around that. But even still, just as a fan, it's like, by the time you're really kind of getting cranked up and you feel like the tailgate's sort of kicking into gear, all of a sudden now it's time for the game to start. Like, that's not as much fun. It's really not. But unfortunately, there's probably more noon starts coming. It's one of those things where, Fox just beat the ESPN folks to this. They saw the noon window. They kind of created their little brand around that, and now ESPN's working to catch up. Al Chandler, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. Sam Burke's also mentioning, excited about the running back room. To me, there is nothing on Saturday more fun than the fact that we'll get a chance to, even though it's only Tennessee Tech, we'll see the debut of Trevor Etienne. Like, how fun is that going to be? That's something that we'll see starting Saturday, presumably, that we did not see this past weekend. You get an idea about how much depth this group might actually have. Beer Cans and Baddies pointing out that Nick Castellanos, the Boston College quarterback, a former Ware County Gator. So that's a little local flair to keep in mind on all that. How about Darian Davis says, checking in from the Pebble Beach Golf Course. What happened to Janelle Aguero? Anybody know? So first of all, Darian, enjoy Pebble Beach. Send us a photo of you out there on that beautiful course there on the Monterey Peninsula. Is it 17-mile drive? Is that what it's called? That goes out that way? Honestly, sure enough, hit me up on X or email me and send me some photos. I'd love to see some of that. But the word on Janelle was, I guess, a muscle pull of some kind. That was what I think was said. I guess a little bit banged up. We'll get more details from Kirby on that, I believe, today. But thought to be a muscle pull, limited in practice this past week. One of those things that did not really come out until, right there around game time. But I guess that was the deal there on that. A little bit of an injury for Janelle. Lesko says that Saban's wins at Mercedes-Benz Stadium were paid for because of his Mercedes dealership. We'll investigate that further and see if we can find that out. Jonathan Aaron says, I was worried about how our line looked on Saturday, even if Clemson. Let me get this from Jonathan. Boy, comments are coming in fast here right now. Even if Clemson has one of the best front sevens in the country, we're said to have one of the best offensive lines in the country. Yeah, I get that. I mean, I do think that Clemson is one of the best. And I think overall, Georgia had a fine day on Saturday. And then Dion asked about Kirby's presser. It'll take place after noon. I mean, just after noon by 12. By that, I mean 12 p.m. We'll have it up on the site by probably about 12:30 or so. I thought the Georgia offensive line was fine on Saturday. I thought the offensive struggles to begin the game were, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know that Carson Beck was playing his best. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow. A lot of people kind of want to put this on Bobo, but I don't know about that. I mean, maybe some of that, and ultimately it probably doesn't matter because the actual game itself works out just fine. But it seemed like Carson was a little hurried to begin this game or something. Wyatt Fielding asked if Bell's going to be okay. He says he is. I mean, to me, that was a lot of caution for just cramps alone, but he says he's going to be. Lesko says he has a new catchphrase for Florida where coaching careers go to die. Y'all, how many failed coaches have they had in consecutive fashion here? I mean, just looking at, from McElwain to Mullen to Napier, this is one of the all-timers. And it's hard to come back from 3 true failures in a row. And of course, Dan Mullen would have you, based on his social media activity this weekend, he sort of feels like he got a raw deal because he's going to New Year's Six Bowls with regularity. Billy Napier can't buy a win, and somehow there's patience. Because, the situation at Florida, beyond just Napier, sort of a mess. Scott Strickland knows as an athletic director, well, if Napier goes, if you're Scott Strickland, you can't just keep firing coaches that you yourself hired. At some point in time, you are sort of expected to hit on one of those. So that's why, Strickland was quoted this weekend. I expect Billy Napier to be our coach for a very long time. Well, that level of confidence, that's all, if you're Strickland, that's all you really can show because it was your job to pick a good coach. And you really need Napier to end up being a good coach if you're going to keep your job. But have y'all been following what's been going on with the university and the president and the alleged improprieties of getting jobs for his friends and these crazy budget things, a lot of allegations of financial impropriety. Now, I don't really care that much about that other than, it is a mess from the top down, from president embroiled in scandal, at least allegedly. Athletic director probably got his fate tied to the football coach. Billy Napier could not fog a window right now. He is just, I called Clemson an NPC a little earlier, a non-playing character. Billy Napier is having no impact on anything happening in college ball whatsoever. He is just not a factor. DMart42 likes Peter Woods from Clemson. He's a good one. He's a good one. And those are the kinds of players that Clemson used to have a lot of. Now they don't have very many of. And that, we would say, is a huge problem. Paul Moon said he thought that Beck was good all game. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's not my place to kind of nitpick here too much. But I don't know. Seemed just maybe a little bit hurried. Beer Cans and Batty says Florida's done. They might as well beg Steve Spurrier to coach them again. Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, the past, all they have. DT says that Kiffin is mid, basically referencing him as a possible replacement for Napier, saying, please, UF, pay him more than Kirby after you fire Sunbelt Billy. Yeah, I mean, obviously I've been wrong about Lane Kiffin at times before, but Lane Kiffin does not scare me at all. Lane Kiffin does not scare me at all. Lane Kiffin's next big win will be his first. That is not a guy that scares me. Senior Dog 54 shouting out Fran Brown getting a big win for Syracuse. He said Zeke Hayes had a nice game for them, but you'd love to see that. Low Country Dog says, imagine UGA recruits sitting there smiling, knowing next year they're going to be part of the G. Boy, you love that. Low Country also critical of Ohio State and Michigan. Yeah, I mean, Ohio State obviously won big. But the Howard kid, man, he's not much a quarterback, is he? I mean, we sort of suggested that it's not even obvious that he was starting for Kansas State. But yeah. And then, Michigan against Texas on Saturday is going to be really interesting. First of all, that's a fun week 2 game, is it not? Don't expect much from Texas. I should say, don't expect much from Michigan is what I mean to say. Don't expect much from Michigan there. I mean, ultimately, I would put Michigan in a pretty similar category of Florida State, 2 teams that just feel very, very different than they were a year ago. Randy Hall with a comment I can't read, although our buddy Trippy Charlie seemed to enjoy it. Senior Dog 54 says Southern Cal is a top 10 team, in my opinion. They were the more physical and better coach team. LSU doesn't have the skilled folks they had in the past. Yeah, I just don't know, man. I mean, it's like if you're Blake Baker, like you left Missouri in what's kind of a preseason top 10 year for them to come be the LSU defensive coordinator. You don't have dudes. You don't have guys. It's like, the one linebacker, he's as good as ever. But, like, where are the guys? I mean, Major Burns had a nice moment last night, but where are the guys for this LSU defense? Like, what has happened when LSU didn't – LSU's had a good defense for 40 years. All of a sudden now they can't get, key stops against USC. And I don't know that I agree with Senior Dog's long-term sort of prognosis about USC this year. But he's right. I mean, I kept thinking that LSU was going to finally break out, bow their back a little bit. But last night, they just let USC be the more physical team. That's embarrassing. And, y'all, did y'all see some of the video? If we had more time, I would have shown this today. LSU fans partying in Vegas before the game. You talk about wild. I mean, can you imagine? I haven't seen these videos yet, although I am certainly open if you'd like to share some of them with me. Can you imagine how rough it would have gotten in some of those places with these LSU fans that overserved after spending all that money to go to Vegas, seeing their team lose to this USC bunch at this point in the lifespan of USC? Can you imagine what that would have been like? Oh, my gosh. Like, can you imagine the security required? Like, there's no telling. I mean, some of the stuff I saw before the game was wild. There's no telling what was going on after the game. Some of that had to be crazy. Randy Hall says that Sling Blade needs to be popping a cool, refreshing Dr. Pepper. I'm telling you, as our Jay Black said, he unscrews the thing 8 times. But it's like the last one that's the best one, because this one, he's trying to get some torque into it. He's like, I'm about to get this thing. Now, in all honesty, have y'all ever had one of these bottles before that just like wasn't cut? Like every now and then there is like one of these bottles that's just didn't have like the perforation on it or something. I mean, I probably have had this happen before. I don't know if we have this video we can play again, but like at the end, like he's really trying to get it, and it's just not going to happen. So, all right, we got something better here. We're gonna get. Oh, and by the way, people were asking about like the thing about Billy Napier getting in a fight with the mascot. That was not true. This is, we've mentioned this already before. That was not true. But the other stuff is true. All right, so here's side by side. What's the worst press conference moment? And first of all, Jay Black, very well done here. High production value to today's show. Mullen being dressed like Darth Vader is probably still better. But Napier, like, he cannot get this thing done, and he won't stop. And then finally, like, honestly, like, him putting the water bottle back down is the saddest thing I've ever seen. Like, all the guy wants is a sip of water. He just wants a sip of water. Just wants a sip of water. I mean, I think in the case of Mullen, I don't even think realizes how much of a doofus that he looks like. I think Napier is at least football serious enough that he knows, like he knows things are bad. You know, like, I don't even think Dan Mullen suspects anything. Like, Mullen was just sort of a guy kind of marching to the beat of his own drum, living his own world, dressed like Darth Vader, trying to explain how come his players got into a fight. Very unprofessional. But Mullen deep down doesn't really care. Like, honestly, Mullen's probably happier than he's ever been right now not coaching. But Billy Napier, I mean, look at the guy. Look at that haircut. Like, I mean, the only thing that guy could do is be a football coach. I mean, like he was born to be a football coach. And yet he's obviously not succeeding. Can't get the water bottle open. Just so desperate for just some refreshing. Just he needs some hydration. He needs it. He can't get it. Much like a touchdown. Like, that's really bad. Really bad. But Mullen, I mean, honestly, the thing that makes me the most mad about Florida right now is they make me miss Dan Mullen. Like the days when he dressed like Darth Vader or all that kind of stuff, like now they've kind of turned him into a sympathetic figure. Sort of miss that. Like, Billy Napier's still just sort of, he's just sort of nothing. I don't know. DT also points out that at least Darth Vader could have done like the Jedi mind trick or something and gotten the water bottle open. And by the way, how about the dunk by Brian Kelly at the end of his very fake, I'm going to slam down my fist thing? At least he got the water bottle open. He should have given like the wink and the nod. Hey, Billy, I got you. I got the water bottle open. By the way, DirecTV obviously had the dispute with Disney, and then they dropped it. This is 2 years in a row. Or is it 2 years in a row? 2 years, 2 of the last 3 years. Maybe that's what it is. Where they've made the decision to drop, their networks off whatever carrier, like right before a big game, right before Utah, I should say Florida, Utah a couple of years ago, before the LSU-USC game last night. Look, I get the idea that if you're in one of these carrier disputes, you're trying to win and you're using everything you can for leverage. This stinks for college football fans. I don't have DirecTV, so it's not an issue for me personally. But this idea that unannounced, like right before a big game like this, as a way of creating maximum leverage for yourself, at least seemingly, you kind of drop one of these deals here. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. I mean, at this point in time, we're all kind of used to the whole idea of the carrier dispute. But the fact that you think so little of football fans in this situation that you do this right before the game, I got no issue. Randy Hall says maybe there needs to be a golden bottle award. Do we do this? Problem is we can't do it branded. Do we do the Napier water bottle? I can't be giving away a free plug, though. Wonder if we could. Let me think on that for a minute. We may find right here at the very end of Napier's football career, we may have finally found some shtick for him. All right, it's late, y'all. We got people who have been working very hard. I want them to be able to go home. A couple final comments. We'll get ready to go. Randy Payne, thanks for the kind words. Appreciate it. Let's see what else. DMart42 says just take the label off or do a reusable one that y'all designed the label for. So that's what I'm thinking about. It's like we got some really smart people around here. Could we get a customized Napier water bottle? And who knows, given what we're prone to do, we might start selling them. Yeah, Foster Moss says you got to get a Gorilla Glued bottle for the set. Blind Squirrel Sports checking out, saying have an awesome day, everybody. Appreciate that. Colby Straughter says, let's have a petition to bring college wrestling back to the SEC. Hey, if there's a petition on that, I'll absolutely sign it. To me, one of the most despicable things in college athletics in the last, so far this century was the way in which college wrestling got treated a few years ago. Absolutely just despicable. To see that, wrestlers have their scholarships taken away from them. I think a truly heinous act. So if there's a way to support that, I absolutely would. Foster Moss on the subject of Malachi Starks playing star. Yeah, kind of fun to see. Well, I guess KJ played safety, put Starks at star. I mean, they got some real moving pieces there. And Malachi obviously played that at a very high level on Saturday. He's a terrific football player. Maybe the best defensive back in the entire country. Paul Moon says he can legit play any defensive back position. Maybe that's the case for sure. Spencer Clark says we need a Georgia rugby team. Maybe so. I don't know a ton about rugby. Aaron Dixon says you were big time if you had a satellite dish back in '85. Yeah, y'all remember like the big satellite dishes, like the really big ones? I knew somebody that had one of those. I was always really impressed by that. Because like back then, I mean, like you had to sort of know how to use it, didn't you? Like you had to like point it in certain directions. That was a big deal back then. Oh, Mr. Wise says the strawberry and cream version of Dr. Pepper, when you mix it with a good bourbon, it's chef's kiss. Yeah, I was telling somebody the other day, it's like strawberries and cream Dr. Pepper, the creamy coconut Dr. Pepper. I know what some of y'all are doing, or most of y'all are doing with that. I do know that. Mr. Wise, just let it be known. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. That's awesome to hear, Mr. Wise. I'm really happy about that. Really happy about that. Glad you are enjoying that, however you're choosing to do so. Back on Facebook, then we're going to go. Steve Shaffini says, I have YouTube TV. It's pretty good for sports. I hear people saying good things about that. This is not an ad. But they get the thing where, like, I guess now you can do, like, the Sunday ticket and you can choose which 4 games you want on the screen. That seems pretty nice. Although, I'm so ADD, I swear. I'm not even sure I could watch 4 games at one time. Like, a lot of people have, like, the 2 TV set up. I'm not sure I could even do that. Like, when I'm watching the NFL, I like the regular Red Zone channel. Just give me, like, 1 game at a time. Like, I know everybody likes when they go quad box, stuff like that. I can't keep up with all that. Jacob O'Neill says his uncle still got one of those old school satellite dishes. State flour of the state of Alabama. A lot of people don't realize that. It's a satellite dish. Denise Loper says, went and bought a new TV just so I can stream ESPN Plus for this weekend. Well, Denise, sounds like you're ready to go. Miriam Corbin, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. She gives you a hashtag 1more in 24. I like that. Steve Shaffini says, I am ADD and I never use it. Yeah, like, I wish I was the kind of person that could, like, I'm watching 4 things at once. Like, last night I'm trying to flip back and forth between the Braves and the, LSU USC game. Even that's hard for me to do. I don't know why I'm so bad ADD, but I swear I feel like I'm getting – it's one of those things, like, you think that's sort of a kid thing. I feel like I'm getting worse as I'm getting older. I think somehow my ADD is getting worse. I didn't even know that was possible. All right, Foster Moss says no hashtags this season. Foster, not the only one to say that. I make no promises. All right, we got to go. Good stuff. Hey, thank you, Kaylee and Jay, on what could have been a day off. Came in here and worked hard for us here today. Really appreciate that. I said before, very hot. Oh, yeah. By the way, they also got another show coming up later on today, too. So from that standpoint, we're fully loaded and ready to go here. But just really thankful for a fun day Y'all, if you are off, hope you enjoy, but stay close to Dog Nation all day long. Coverage from what Georgia coach Kirby Smart, Georgia players have to say. On the beat tonight, 7 p.m., you'll see that. And then back here tomorrow. So big thanks to R.S. Andrews who make it all possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. R.S. Andrews shows up and does good stuff for you there on that. They do it on time, work that's promised, the price is promised. That's what they're all about, including getting that air conditioning unit back to factory fresh specs. Boy, it ain't getting any cooler, is it? It is not getting any cooler. It is hot as can be outside. And R.S. Andrews is there for you when that is your situation. So find them online, rsandrews.com. Have a great day. We're back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll talk to you then, everybody.